Welcome to the deep dive. Today, you and I are getting into a recent online event that's really stirred up some conversation. It's a webinar by Ash Mufareh called Historic Comeback. We've got a pretty detailed summary here, and, well, our goal is to pull out the main themes, the real takeaways, so you get a clear picture of Mufareh's direction, especially if you're tracking things like business strategy, leadership, or tech innovation.
Yeah, and it's obvious this webinar hit home for a lot of people. I mean, the summary says over 2,000 questions came in. That tells you something, right? How invested the audience is and the anticipation around his plans. It's also interesting. They mentioned some questions couldn't be answered right away, suggests maybe a staged release of info. And it sounds like they really tried to make it welcoming, acknowledging different backgrounds and beliefs.
Exactly. So let's jump right in. One of the first big things that seemed to stand out was this long-term vision. Mufareh was really clear, apparently, that success isn't just a point you reach, it's the whole journey. What was your take on that?
Well, what's interesting there is how he connected that long journey to personal character. He brought up integrity, especially when things get tough. It kind of suggests that the bumps in the road and how you deal with them are just as vital as the wins. It's about building something solid, not just quick fixes.
It clicks. It's that
Yeah.
resilience idea, yeah. And he also mentioned being present and actually in the process, not just looking towards some future outcome.
Absolutely. This idea that you need to be actively involved, putting in consistent effort along the way. And if you connect that to the overall feel of the webinar, it really seems like a deliberate pivot. Less focus on past struggles, more on future goals, this feeling of transformation, learning from before, but actively building anew.
Right. And that flows pretty naturally into the leadership discussion. Mufareh apparently talked about leadership being fundamentally about trust, about the quality of your relationships. He even made a contrast between, I think he called them transactional relationships, and ones built on real trust. Can you unpack that a bit?
Sure. So think of transactional as purely you do this, I do that. You provide a service, I pay. End of story. Trust-based is deeper. It involves mutual respect, understanding, thinking long-term, believing in the other person's, integrity. And what really stood out was him saying he'd rather follow a leader he trusts than just jump on some new product he doesn't know. That says a lot about where he places value.
And the summary dropped hints about a more powerful chapter ahead, promising updates too. That definitely builds some curiosity.
It does. And promising transparency about new products, about his vision, that's crucial. Whenever big changes are coming, keeping people in the loop, well, that builds confidence. It strengthens those trust-based connections we were just talking about.
Okay, now the talk also went beyond just, the bottom line. It touched on passion, on community, a real focus on personal growth, valuing friendships. It sounds like the main motivation isn't purely financial.
Yeah, and what's interesting is how success is framed. It's not the only goal, right? It's more like an outcome that comes from focusing on personal development, on making real connections. It suggests this belief that if you focus on creating value, on building those strong relationships, then, recognition, maybe money, that'll follow.
And they made a point of highlighting the community's role too, acknowledging contributions from lots of people, reinforces that idea that success isn't a solo act.
Exactly. That feeling of collective effort, mutual support, it's so important. A strong community gives you encouragement, feedback, a shared purpose, which can be incredibly powerful, especially when you're trying to do something big.
So this community focus then connects to the whole collaboration piece and empowering online businesses. The webinar acknowledged the struggles many people face trying to make it online, and it raises a key question for you, the listener. Is this new phase going to offer the actual tools and support needed for online businesses to, really succeed?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? So many people hit roadblocks, online, tech stuff, marketing, you name it. The fact that people appreciated the project's vision, comparing it to using your talents well, that speaks volumes. People want solutions that let them reach their online potential.
And this idea of collective talent was pushed, that when people team up, bring different skills, the results are bigger for their businesses and for them personally.
That synergy is key. Leveraging different strengths, different viewpoints to reach shared goals. That's how you get innovation, how everyone moves forward together.
Let's swing back to that historic comeback title. The summary paints a picture of real excitement, gratitude from the people there. This event felt like a big deal, almost like a turning point was reached.
The energy definitely sounds like it was high. And the timing during Holy Week for some attendees, that might add another layer of meaning for them. Renewal? Maybe. new starts. The participants talking about resilience, faith, believing that sticking with it pays off. It really highlights how significant they felt this moment was, like a shared belief in moving past difficulties toward something better.
Sounds like it. And a huge part of that something better is this move to a totally new business platform, the reason given. A need for a completely fresh start, a clean break from what came before.
Yeah, deciding to basically start from scratch, that suggests they want to maybe tackle some core limitations or perhaps bring in totally new tech, new ways of doing things, making sure the transition is smooth for existing users, logins and teams. That's a practical thing, but absolutely vital to avoid chaos.
Right. And even though it's about building this brand new space with its own rules, there was a hint that maybe people from the old platform might get some advantages. Seems like a balancing act, starting fresh, but also acknowledging who's been around. But the main point seems to be new foundation, not carrying over the old baggage.
That clean slate approach, it can be really freeing, actually. It lets you bring in the latest stuff without being tied down by old systems. Plus, it's a chance to maybe improve processes, make things more user-friendly.
Which leads us to what probably has a lot of people buzzing, the upcoming innovations, these disruptive technologies they mentioned. The next phase is apparently going to rely heavily on these advanced tools, and there's been this deliberate pause in sharing details, which, as you said, really ramps up the anticipation.
Oh yeah, that strategic quiet, it can work wonders for building interest. And the promise that this new tech will be cutting edge, more scalable, maybe even cheaper. That's a big deal. Scalable means ready for growth. Affordable means more people can get involved.
And this idea that these disruptive technologies might actually shake up existing business models, especially on pricing, that's really interesting. It hints at innovation not just in the tech itself, but in how they deliver value. Plus, we're getting hints of unique strategies coming in 2025 meant to get stakeholders really excited.
Yeah, that potential for disruptive pricing could really ripple through the market. And promising unique strategies for next year shows they're thinking ahead, trying to grab attention and deliver serious value to their community.
So let's try and wrap this up. This deep dive into Ash Mufarah's historic comeback webinar really brings out several key ideas for you to think about. Understanding success as a long game built on character, the absolute importance of trust and relationships in leadership, focusing on passion and community, not just profit, the potential of collaboration for online businesses, the feeling that this is a pivotal moment, a strategic move to a totally new platform, and of course the promise of some potentially game-changing tech.
Absolutely. The whole narrative is really leaning into this historic comeback idea, creating this strong sense of looking forward,
Yeah.
a very resilient, future-focused vibe.
Right. And with that, here's something for you to chew on. Given this heavy focus on both disruptive tech and building community, what kinds of fundamental changes do you see possibly coming to the online business world? And how crucial might prioritizing those real connections alongside genuine innovation be for businesses and individuals trying to really thrive, not just survive, in whatever comes next? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Basically distilled the key points from that call. And what seems to be coming through is, well, a sense of imminent activity, some strategic changes, and definitely a renewed focus on communication.
Okay.
He talked about future launches, realigning things, and keeping everyone in the loop. So yeah, let's unpack what that all actually means.
Okay, let's do that. Let's unpack it. Starting with probably what's top of mind for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Those upcoming launches.
Right.
Mr. Ash apparently indicated they're expected within the coming months. But what really stood out to me was his emphasis that things will happen sooner than maybe people thought.
Yeah, not months or a year off sort
Okay.
of time frame, more near term.
Yeah.
Exactly. What do you make of that kind of accelerated timeline he's suggesting?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Especially because tied to that, there was this stress on the original video of the update call being very important. It makes you wonder, were the reasons for this faster pace or maybe even some specifics about the launches discussed more in that original video?
That's a really good point. It suggests there might be more context there.
Definitely. It hints that maybe the full picture, the why behind the speed, is in that original source.
Right. And even though our summary doesn't spell out what these launches are exactly, the fact he's highlighting how soon they are, well, it creates a sense of anticipation, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It signals something significant is on the horizon.
So typically, what kind of things would push a company to accelerate launches like this? I mean, what might be driving it?
Well, it could be a few things, really. Maybe key development steps got finished ahead of schedule. That happens.
Okay, that makes sense.
Or it could be more strategic, like maybe there's a market window they want to hit, or perhaps they need to respond to competitive moves faster than planned.
Ah, right. Competitive pressures.
Yeah. And this also ties into the next point. We should probably discuss the whole strategic realignment piece.
Yes, let's get into that.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's a deliberate effort going on to sort of refine ONPASSIVE's overall direction.
Mm-hmm. Strategic realignments.
And a big part of this, it seems, is tackling misinformation. The summary mentions a significant amount of it floating around.
Yeah, that stood out.
Why do you think focusing on misinformation is so important right now for them?
Well, acknowledging it upfront is pretty telling. It suggests it's a real challenge they're facing. It makes you ask where it's coming from and how it might be affecting things, the community, the company's image,
Sure.
and the fact that they're emphasizing direct communication from the CEO as being crucial. Well, that shows leadership is aware, and they're trying to create a clear channel, straight from the top to counter it.
And it also mentioned Mr. Ash is working with a new team on these strategies. That's interesting.
It is.
How might bringing in new people impact both the strategy rethink and fighting that misinformation?
A new team can bring, well, fresh eyes, right? Different skills, perhaps. Maybe people who are specialists in communication turnarounds or strategic pivots.
Okay.
It could signal they're really serious about changing things up, injecting some new energy into tackling these problems.
Makes sense. Okay, shifting gears slightly to recent developments mentioned in the update. It referenced back to September 2023.
Right, a specific time frame.
And a key point was the start of commission payments. That sounds pretty major.
Oh, absolutely. For those eligible, starting to see commissions, that's tangible progress. It's likely a big morale boost, showing the operational side is moving forward.
Definitely a concrete step.
But it's also worth noting the summary did mention some concerns about potential job losses connected to certain circumstances.
Ah, okay. So it's not all straightforwardly positive then. There's some nuance.
Exactly. It paints a more complex picture. Progress in one area, but potential difficulties or adjustments may be happening elsewhere.
Right. In the summary notes, Mr. Ash is committed to keeping people informed through these changes. His visit on December 26th was highlighted as being important for that.
Mm-hmm. That direct engagement.
Why is that so critical? Especially when there might be difficult news or uncertainty. Having the leader show up and talk directly.
It's huge for building trust, isn't it? And transparency. When leaders communicate directly, especially during tricky times, it allows people to ask questions, voice concerns.
Yeah, it feels less like information is being hidden.
Precisely. It helps people understand the why behind decisions and hopefully maintain confidence in the overall direction, even if there are bumps in the road.
Okay. Another theme that came through was founder engagement. Founders are apparently actively participating.
Yeah, a collaborative spirit was mentioned.
And the importance of genuine actions from everyone involved was stressed. What does that phrase, genuine actions, signal to you?
Genuine actions. It sounds like they're looking for more than just passive agreement. It suggests a call for real, meaningful contributions. Authenticity.
Like walk the talk.
Kind of, yeah. Active, sincere participation to actually help drive things forward, not just being on the list, but being involved. That kind of commitment from early supporters is often vital.
And interestingly, founders were also encouraged to pursue their own initiatives while waiting for more company updates,
Right, that was an interesting bit.
empowering people to act independently. What could be the upside of that kind of approach?
Well, it taps into the skills and ideas across the whole founder base, doesn't it? You might get creative solutions popping up that the central company wouldn't have thought of.
Yeah, like grassroots innovation.
Exactly. It also keeps people engaged, gives them a sense of ownership and momentum, even if the main company developments are still pending. It could even generate useful stuff the company can adopt later.
A more hands-on approach, potentially providing solutions from within the community itself.
Could be. It fosters a more proactive culture, maybe.
Now let's circle back to the pace of progress. Mr. Ash apparently kept emphasizing the rapid speed of projects,
Yes, that came up repeatedly.
reiterating that significant developments are imminent, that sooner rather than later message again. Why keep hitting that point so hard, do you think?
Well, it does a few things, I suppose. It builds excitement, obviously. Keeps the community energized and hopeful that things are really moving.
Manages expectations upwards, in a way.
Maybe. Or reassures them progress is happening fast behind the scenes. It could also be a message to the wider market. Signaling momentum.
Right, projecting confidence.
Yeah. And it connects nicely with expressing gratitude for the community's support. Like, thanks for sticking with us. Things are happening fast. It reinforces that positive loop.
Makes sense. But alongside that forward momentum, he also acknowledged recent setbacks,
Yes, that's important too.
recognizing challenges, saying they've provided lessons and influenced these strategic changes they're making now. What's the value in openly admitting setbacks like that?
It builds credibility, I think, shows they're not pretending everything's perfect, and suggests the current plans aren't just theory, but they're based on actual experience, learning from what didn't work.
So a more pragmatic approach, perhaps.
Exactly. It can actually be quite reassuring for the community, showing the company is willing to learn and adapt based on real-world stuff.
And he gave assurances that these ongoing efforts are aimed at getting to, better and more secure outcomes down the line.
Mm-hmm. Future-focused.
And crucially, they're apparently committed to seeking feedback now to make sure communication and engagement actually work effectively.
Why is setting up that feedback loop so vital?
Oh, it's essential for any group that relies on a community like this.
Yeah.
It lets you know if your message is landing, allows for course correction.
Avoids talking into an echo chamber. Right. It builds a sense of partnership. If you actively ask for and use feedback, people feel heard, and you can make sure what you're building actually aligns with what the community needs or expects. It builds stronger relationships.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. To recap our deep dive into this Mr. Ash update.
Yeah.
We're definitely hearing strong signals about launches coming up pretty soon.
Yeah, imminence is a key theme.
There's a clear push on strategic realignment, getting the company back on track, and actively fighting misinformation.
Right. Addressing challenges head on.
And the update really underscores how much they value the community and the founders being actively involved, all shaped by recent experiences, both the good and the bad.
Absolutely. It paints a picture of a company in motion, adapting, and trying to communicate clearly about its next steps.
So thinking about all this, Mr. Ash really hammering home the rapid pace, the need to fix misinformation, and leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener.
Yeah, considering all that, what specific expectations or maybe even concerns does this raise for you about where ONPASSIVE is heading? And I guess, how important do you feel it is to stay informed and have a clear perspective as all this continues to unfold? Something to think about.
Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're jumping into a set of sources you provided. They all center around a speech by Mr. Ash Mufari about ONPASSIVE's mission. Specifically, its, potential impact in Nigeria.
That's right. And our aim for this deep dive is really to unpack the key points from these sources, understand the vision being presented, and see what it tells us about ONPASSIVE's focus on Nigeria.
More than just a summary, getting into the message itself.
Exactly. What's the deeper significance here?
Okay, let's unpack this then. We're looking at summaries, key excerpts from this speech.
Yeah, and the context is pretty striking right off the bat. According to the sources, this speech happened in Nigeria, specifically on their 62nd Independence Day.
Wow, okay. So that sets a particular stage.
Definitely. The sources say it opens with greetings, acknowledging the importance of the day, celebrating it.
Standard enough to start.
But then almost immediately, the summary suggests it pivots. While celebrating, it also apparently highlights what the speaker sees as failures in various systems within Nigeria.
Interesting. So acknowledging the pride, but also sort of the unmet potential or challenges.
Precisely. It sets up this dynamic potential despite problems. And the sources say Mr. Mufara expressed a real commitment to making a positive impact.
And framed Nigeria as critical for Africa's future.
Yes, absolutely critical. There's even specific language noted in the sources praising the potential of the Nigerian people themselves. The message seemed pretty direct. Any big plans for Africa have to include Nigeria.
Okay. So pride, potential, but facing challenges squarely.
Which leads us right into the next theme that comes through in the source material.
Okay.
Identifying those ongoing struggles.
And the summary doesn't mince words, does it? It points to things like corruption, security.
Yeah, explicitly mentioned according to the report. And it's right at this point that ONPASSIVE is brought in.
Oh, okay.
And not just as an idea, but presented as having existing solutions ready to potentially tackle some of these issues in Nigeria.
Right. This is where it gets really specific based on the notes provided. The sources pinpoint particular areas ONPASSIVE is targeting. Education is one, right? Revolutionizing it.
That's highlighted as a primary commitment. And it's framed as a path to, overall societal improvement. Big goals.
And not just education in isolation.
No. The summary stressed that enhancing the financial system was just as vital and needed to happen alongside educational reform. It's presented as this integrated approach.
An integrated transformation. And the sources make a point about the type of solution, don't they?
They do. It's emphasized that the speech wasn't talking about quick fixes, not temporary stuff.
Like Band-Aids?
Exactly. It called for sustainable, lasting solutions. It even specifically mentioned moving past ideas like crowdfunding, which seemed to be dismissed as, well, not enough for deep change.
Okay, so the focus is clearly on systemic foundational shifts, not just patching things up.
That's a really key takeaway from the sources, yeah.
And this ambition for deep impact, it seems to feed into the vision part described. Nigeria wasn't just another market possibility.
Apparently not. The sources state Nigeria was identified as a definite priority for launching what the speech called life-changing products and innovations.
Life-changing, that's quite a claim.
It really underlines the scale of the vision being communicated. And again, it brings us back to education. Revolutionizing the educational system is repeatedly flagged as a key target for this impact.
But not the only target.
No, the source material suggests the speech indicated other sectors would benefit too, like a ripple effect from these innovations.
Okay, so connecting this bigger picture,
Yeah.
the sources mention some powerful language used in the speech about achieving true independence.
Yes, true independence and a paradigm shift for Nigeria, directly linking these big ideas to the ONPASSIVE initiative.
True independence, that's loaded, especially given the Independence Day context.
Yeah.
What do the sources suggest that actually means in this framing?
Well, it seems framed through this combination of technological and economic transformation, but it's not purely tech-driven.
Okay.
The speech, according to the sources, also really recognized the talented, educated people in Nigeria. They weren't just passive recipients.
Right, they were positioned as key contributors to making it all work.
Essential contributors, yeah. So building it with Nigerians, not just for them. That seems to be the message.
That's an important distinction.
And there's this really striking phrase captured. ONPASSIVE's arrival in Nigeria is presented almost as a catalyst for true freedom and independence.
A catalyst, like the spark needed to achieve something deeper than just formal independence.
Exactly, building on that foundation. And the sources also report this belief was stated that success in Nigeria specifically would be critical for ONPASSIVE's own global success as a company.
Which circles back to that priority status we talked about.
It really reinforces it, and this belief was apparently coupled with a commitment, also noted in the sources, that their actions would be driven by this intense determination to succeed there.
This level of ambition, this focus on true independence, it sounds like it must lead towards a call to action. How did the speech frame that, according to the sources?
It really seems to center the effort on the Nigerian people themselves. The source material highlights a strong emphasis on unity. Unity being absolutely essential to achieve the mission.
And there was a personal touch mentioned, too. The speaker calling himself a brother.
Yeah, reportedly introducing himself that way, pledging positive changes, creating that connection.
But the core message about who drives the change.
The core assertion, strongly highlighted in the sources, is that real change must come from the people.
Okay.
And this was reportedly contrasted explicitly with relying on, say, traditional authorities or regimes. The speech seemed to frame those as maybe sources of past failures or stagnation.
So positioning this as something separate from, or maybe even bypassing, the usual political channels, a kind of grassroots movement.
That seems to be the implication. The sources point to this call for collective support, for determination, urging people to work hard. It even apparently dismissed past failures by suggesting it was just a lack of sufficient effort, not, impossible problems.
Interesting framing.
And the conclusion drawn from this line of argument, as reported, is that ONPASSIVE is presented as this necessary shift towards effective solutions for Nigeria.
A necessary shift, powered by the people. That definitely adds a sense of urgency, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The sources convey a real sense of urgency from the speech, like a concern that if ONPASSIVE doesn't succeed in Nigeria, the country risks falling back into old cycles of stagnation.
The stakes are framed incredibly high then.
Very high. The speech reportedly stressed that making ONPASSIVE work is necessary specifically for Nigeria, framing its success as vital for the nation's whole future.
Wow. That's a lot to put on one initiative.
It is. And this call for immediate action was paired with a pretty powerful statement reported in the sources that the next generation is relying on their efforts.
Directly linking it to the future for young Nigerians. That's a heavy responsibility to place on the audience.
It certainly is. And interestingly, the sources mention that in the same context, the speech included a warning.
Against what?
against trusting politicians, which again reinforces that idea of this being presented as an alternative path, maybe outside the established political system.
Okay, so urgency, high stakes, a people-driven approach, skepticism towards politics.
Right. And while the sources mention excitement being described around ONPASSIVE,
Yes.
the speech also apparently balanced that by stressing that a lot of hard work is still needed in Nigeria to make these goals a reality. It wasn't pitched as, a guaranteed win or an easy road.
Got it. So manage expectations alongside the excitement. Hard work is key.
Exactly. And finally, the sources mention one more thing, that while they couldn't reveal all the details, a strategic plan is supposedly in place.
And that plan.
It reportedly prioritizes success in Nigeria, even over potentially easier markets elsewhere.
Okay, even if other places might seem like quicker wins, Nigeria comes first.
That's the message conveyed in the sources, yeah. It really hammers home how central Nigeria is painted in this whole vision and plan described in the speech. It's not just a market, it's framed as the priority.
So let's try to synthesize this. What does it all add up to?
Well, based purely on the source material you shared, we've dived into a speech outlining a really ambitious vision for Nigeria. It's centered on using on-passive solutions, especially in education and finance. Those were highlighted to drive systemic, sustainable change.
And we heard how the speech frames this not merely as a corporate project, but as a movement, a people-driven effort calling for unity, aiming for this idea of true independence.
Yeah, and we definitely pick up on that strong sense of urgency reported in the sources, plus the strategic commitment. Nigeria being explicitly named as the priority, crucial for the company's wider success, even if it's the harder path.
So looking just at these sources, Nigeria is presented as absolutely pivotal to ONPASSIVE's mission and its future, according to this speech.
Which leaves us, and you, with a pretty interesting question to chew on. When a global initiative positions itself as a catalyst for technological and economic transformation, how does that potentially redefine what true independence means for a nation?
Especially when that vision is explicitly tied, as the sources suggest it was, to the efforts and hopes of the next generation.
Something to think about until our next deep dive.
Okay, let's dive in. We've got this stack of material you provided, articles, research notes, quite a mix.
Yeah, all focused on ONPASSIVE, and this other name, On Fusion.
Right. Try and figure out what's really going on, especially looking at, June 2025.
Cutting through some of the chatter, maybe.
Exactly. So our goal here, just using what you've given us, what's the actual situation, is ONPASSIVE launching anything in June 2025?
And, well, based purely on these sources, the answer is a pretty clear no.
No, really?
No official launch plan for ONPASSIVE itself in June 2025. That's what this material indicates.
Huh. But there's so much talk. Why? Why do the sources say no launch? What's the reason given?
So the documents here, they point to a pretty big change. They suggest the original ONPASSIVE entity was formally wound down.
Wound down.
Yeah, ceased operations. Seems like that happened early in 2025.
So it's not just quiet, it's actually stopped as a functioning thing.
That seems to be the picture from these sources, and it looks like it